If you have ever wondered why Americans seem permanently busy while Europeans are already planning their next long holiday,
Something I noticed in America, yeah, we have vacation days, but do people actually go on vacation?
Just how many days you work per day when you're a worker, but how much vacation do you take? When do you retire?
Average 4 days a year per individual being left on the table as it relates to vacation days.
you are not imagining things. On paper, the gap is huge. The average American works hundreds more hours every year than workers in countries like Germany or France. That's not a few late nights, that's the equivalent of weeks of extra work. And it shows. Many Americans regularly push past 40 hours, skip long vacations, and feel uneasy about taking time off at all. Across the Atlantic, long breaks are protected, expected, and rarely questioned. So, what actually keeps American workdays so long? Why does working less feel risky here, but normal elsewhere? And who really benefits from all those extra hours? To understand that, we need to uncover the choices that quietly reshaped how the modern world works. Take a moment and think about your average work week. 40 hours, 45, maybe more. Now imagine doing that year after year, with only a short break in between. That's the everyday reality for millions of Americans, and it's what puts the US in a league of its own when it comes to working time. According to OECD data, the average American worker clocks about 1,811 hours a year. In Germany, that number drops to around 1,340. That's a gap of 471 hours. Put simply, that's like Americans working the equivalent of almost 3 extra months every year compared to some Europeans. And this isn't hidden in averages, it shows up in real life. Around 40% of Americans say they work between 41 and 50 hours a week. In Europe, that figure is much lower. Vacation tells an even clearer story. 60% of Americans say they never take a holiday lasting 2 weeks or more. Meanwhile, nearly a third of Europeans take over 25 vacation days every year. For many Europeans, long breaks are routine. For many Americans, they feel risky. What's striking is the mindset behind it. About 1 in 3 Americans admit they feel guilty taking time off. In Europe, fewer than 1 in 5 feel that way. So the gap isn't just about hours on a clock, it's about how work fits into life. But this wasn't always the case. Not long ago, Americans actually worked less than Europeans, and the US helped lead the way on shorter work weeks. So how did America go from setting limits on work to becoming the hardest working economy in the developed world? To understand this, we have to clear up one big myth. This isn't about culture. Americans didn't suddenly become work-obsessed, and Europeans didn't just decide to slow down. For much of the 1950s and 1960s, it was actually the opposite. Workers in Germany, France, the UK, and Italy all put in longer hours than Americans. The United States was ahead of the curve, pushing the 5-day work week and selling the idea that productivity didn't require endless hours. The real split began in the 1970s, when productivity started rising fast on both sides of the Atlantic. This is where the paths diverged. Western European countries made a clear choice. When economies grew more efficient, workers would get some of that gain back as time. Shorter work weeks, longer vacations, and stronger limits on working hours became part of the social contract. The US made a different call. Instead of trading productivity for free time, America traded it for higher pay and more consumption. One economist found that since 1973, the US has used less than 8% of its productivity gains to reduce working hours. Western Europe used 3 to 4 times that share. The outcome wasn't accidental. It was shaped by policy, labor laws, and bargaining power, not personal attitude. In Europe, stronger unions and social protections helped lock in shorter hours as a norm. In the US, weaker labor power meant longer hours quietly became the default. Over time, those decisions stacked up, year after year, until working long hours stopped feeling temporary and started feeling normal. And once long hours become the norm, they are hard to escape. Think about how hard it is to truly switch off from work in the US. Even when the laptop is closed, the pressure is still there. And that's not accidental, it's built into the system itself. Start with health insurance. In the US, for most full-time workers, healthcare is tied directly to your job. For employers, that creates a clear incentive. They pay a fixed cost for health insurance per employee, no matter how many hours that person works. So instead of hiring 2 people for 25 hours each, it's cheaper to work 1 person for 50 hours. The result is fewer workers, longer hours, and less flexibility, all baked into a system that dates back to World War II. Then there is the salary trap. About 44% of US workers are salaried. That sounds stable, but it comes with a catch. Once you are on salary, extra hours are basically unpaid. No overtime clock, no extra compensation. Research shows that moving from hourly to salaried work can add 100 or more hours a year. For employers, those hours are free. For workers, pushing back can feel risky, especially in competitive industries. Taxes and labor power also matter. In many European countries, higher taxes on additional income reduce the reward for working longer hours. Combine that with strong unions, and workers have leverage to demand shorter weeks and longer vacations. In the US, unions are weaker, and the financial push to work more is stronger. And then there's the law itself. In the European Union, the average work week is capped at 48 hours. In the US, there's no federal limit. That absence alone sends a message about what's expected. All those extra hours come with a price, and it shows up first in how people feel about their lives. Only about 34% of Americans say they are happy with their work-life balance. In Europe, that number is well over half. More than half of US workers say their co-workers seem stressed often or all the time, and research consistently links weeks over 45 hours to a much higher risk of burnout. So while Americans do log more work time, it doesn't automatically translate into feeling better off. Productivity makes the story more complicated. Data from workplace software shows the average US office worker spends about 50 more productive minutes per day on their computer than the average European. Over a year, that adds up to roughly 27 extra 8-hour workdays. The US also leads in technology adoption and innovation, which boosts output per hour. But even with those gains, the human strain is hard to ignore. You can see that strain in how people take time off. The idea of a quiet vacation, where someone takes a day off but keeps answering emails in secret, says a lot about how hard it is to truly disconnect. Time off exists on paper, but not always in practice. There are signs this might be changing. Gallup data shows average weekly hours for full-time US workers dropped from about 44.1 hours in 2019 to 42.9 in 2024. The biggest shift is among younger workers. Gen Z is the group most likely to report working a standard 31 to 40-hour week, signaling a push toward balance rather than constant grind. Then there's AI. Some researchers estimate that productivity gains from AI could allow nearly 28% of the US workforce to move to a 4-day, 32-hour work week within a decade. The big question is whether that saved time goes to workers or simply turns into more output. In the end, the hours we work aren't fixed by nature. They are the result of choices, and right now those choices are back on the table.